be flexible, like try stuff. I think music still has a long way to go in its sort of imagining what that is, the music experience, the listening experience. I think there's a way to go there.
Hi, I'm James Taylor, business creativity and innovation keynote speaker, and this is The Creative Life, a show dedicated to you, the creative. If you're looking for motivation, inspiration, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's an author, musician, entrepreneur, performer, designer, or thought leader. They'll share with you their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, and much, much more. You'll find show notes for this episode, as well as free training on creativity, over at jamestaylor.me. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to welcome onto the show Conor Brady. Conor is a passionate believer in the power of great storytelling and experience design, no matter the channel or the medium. In his role as Chief Creative Officer at Critical Mass, he oversees the agency's work and drives creative excellence on a global scale. Prior to joining Critical Mass, he worked at digital agencies Huge and Organic, holding the title of Chief Creative Officer at each. Throughout his career, he has played a decisive role in shaping the digital experiences of BMW, Apple, Nike, Audi, Samsung, and Pepsi. Originally from Belfast in Northern Ireland, Conor began his career in publishing, designing the first 100 book covers for Vintage Paperbacks in London. He then moved into the music industry as a creative director at Universal Music Polygram, designing record covers. And today he's doing some amazing work that we're going to be talking about. So first of all, Conor, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Great to have you here. So to share with everyone what's going on in your world just now.
Business is it's busy. You know, it's interesting being in an agency right now. I think the agency model is really changing, and I think how we do business is changing. We're seeing a lot of growth with existing clients, which is pretty cool, like long-term relationships where you have a client really trying to figure out how technology changes their business. That's pretty cool. Working on sort of design and tech to sort of really sort of push business forward. I think the other part of it is just us getting smarter about how we work. You know, trying to find time within those budgets to think, and find more time to think, you know, because we can get more efficient with the tools that we use. So those are two big things that we're doing right now, sort of optimizing the process and sort of like building on sort of like long-term trust with like really good clients.
So I mentioned that you're from Belfast originally, and then first job was within music, designing album covers. How did that first kind of creative role come about?
It was interesting. It's like when I was at college, I had sort of one foot in design and one foot in image making or illustration. You know, when you go through college in England, you get a really robust sort of foundation course where you try everything. And, you know, I was one of those people that sort of could have gone either way. And, you know, I think all the way through to sort of even taking courses at the Royal College with Dan Fern and doing illustration there, I still had a real passion for design, and I was trying to figure out how the two things came together. And actually, it was at my degree show, I met Peter Dyer, who at the time was working at Jonathan Cave Publishers, and he sort of like saw something in the illustration work that I really liked, but then realized at the same time I could do design. So that's kind of how I ended up doing publishing, and then publishing into the music industry was a very natural progression. It was really about, you know, kind of capture a mood or a story inside a single image, and knowing that you've got someone's attention for maybe 4 to 5 seconds if they're walking through what was then a record store. I don't know if you remember Virgin Records.
I remember those. I remember what those looked like.
I remember those things. So, you know, back then, you know, you had a very short period of time to capture someone's attention and sort of really trying to figure out what was going to do that. That's how I ended up there. It was that sort of combination of like the power of imagery and just really beautiful design wrapped around that. Whether it be for publishing or the music industry, that was something that really interested me and how I ended up in there doing that.
I always think it must be very difficult for album designers today, because you're dealing with, most of the time you're dealing with a Spotify, you know, little image, thumbnail, and you want to put, you know, there's long gone the days of like vinyl covers and things. I know you actually continue to work with music artists, and you work with your agencies, work with Rihanna, for example, albeit in other side, not necessarily in the music side of what she does. Would you, if you were advising a young designer today, would you necessarily say to them to be involved in doing music? Is music still a vibrant place, or
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think music and publishing are making quite the comeback. I mean, I saw an article in the Guardian not so long ago that was talking about how physical book sales through independent booksellers is outstripping e-reader sales. So that was a moment that made me stop in my tracks, because everybody up to that point was convinced that e-readers were going to kill publishing, or at least the physical book. And it hasn't. And if anything, I think there's a little bit of a backlash against everything being digital and people sort of craving those really beautiful moments when you have something physical in your hand and you're reading it. I think the same applies for music. I see bands now doing special edition presses on vinyl. Like it's because there's something missing in the digital world, that story around the story, if you know what I mean. It's like, I remember listening to music with an album cover in my hands, reading liner notes as I'm listening to the music. That experience is gone now, and I think it's a shame. I seem to have specialized in picking verticals of design that get smaller and smaller over time. I know when I started in the music industry, we were working with vinyl, and that went to CDs, that then went to that, and then it went to iTunes. So the format essentially disappeared. And for books, it's the same. I still collect and read books a lot, and I still love the power of like a really great visual on a book cover. So a young designer today, I mean, I just say be open-minded. I don't think, I think maybe more so now than when I was leaving college. I think we were really encouraged to pick one and go for it. So make yourself a book designer, or make yourself a music industry designer, or whatever it was. I think now your ability to sort of move between those different formats as a young designer coming up, that's what I would say. Be flexible, like try stuff. I think music still has a long way to go in its sort of imagining what that is, the music experience, the listening experience. I think there's a way to go there.
And what's the thing that links each of these different areas? So for example, from that, whether it's an album cover, or whether it's a book publishing cover, or whether it's a lot of the work I see you do today around, for example, we'll talk about what you've done with the UN recently. Is it story? Is that the thing that links all of these different areas, or is it?
Yeah, I think the narrative is something that's there. I mean, I think starting out in publishing, it was really interesting to sort of be given a book in its script form, and then having to sort of boil that down to a single image. So you might have 300 pages that you're trying to capture a mood or an atmosphere or a narrative or a moment in a single snapshot. I mean, that was a skill that took a really long time to develop, and really sort of try and capture the mood of a book in a single thing. Music, you had a little bit more to play with, because what was nice about music, especially when you were working on CDs, you had the booklet, so you had more space to sort of open up the story a little bit, and those things in the way that you packaged them. And I think back in the days of like people like Vaughan Oliver or Peter Saville or V23, and what they were doing, it was more than just packaging. Like over the format, the story kind of literally unfolded. I think that was really nice. So that sense of story then over time was where the music industry kind of took me. And then if I think about what we did with the United Nations, I mean, that was really a piece that was essentially a combination of formats that went from designing an exhibition, literally a physical space, into something that sort of existed on a phone as you walked around that space, that essentially created an audio recording that sort of guided you. So that really unfolded over time, from the minute you walk through the door of the exhibition to sort of seeing and feeling the environment, to then being guided by an audio experience that essentially flipped halfway through and dropped you into a whole other thing. That again was about story. It was about, over time, unfolding a story and surprising someone in a moment to get them to take an action. In this case, to donate for the United Nations. In the case of a book, it's about sort of connecting with the author. But stories
and the work you did with the UN, that exhibition was around landmines, small armaments, by getting those out. And I saw part of the exhibition. I saw the video of the exhibition. And there was a great quote in it where, I can't remember who said it. It said, if there was a single unexploded landmine in New York City today, no one would move. And you really kind of took that. So just talk us through, for anyone that doesn't understand about how these type of creative briefs come about, and how you go about developing how you think creatively in a team like that, and execute with different technologies and different methods. To take us through in a little snapshot of that.
So the particular client really interested. They're a group inside the United Nations called the Mine Action Service, and their goal in our lifetime is to rid the world of ordnance post-conflict. So they go into Syria, they go into Afghanistan, they go into Iraq, Iran, and anywhere where there's been conflict and landmines have been planted, and conflict has moved on or stopped, and populations go back into those villages to live in a daily life. No one was going back in and removing the ordnance. So they're literally living day to day amongst minefields. And, you know, it's interesting to look at an organization like these guys. They literally go in and clear that and make it livable again. Up until this point, they get funded mostly, as most things within the United Nations happens, through government giving money, or through the foundations that they set up, or the funds themselves. So they rarely go to the public to raise awareness or ask for money. And what was interesting with these guys was they knew that they could it was such a powerful cause, and to really rid the world of this goal in their lifetime, going to the public was the smart thing to do. But United Nations, despite being probably one of the most recognized names in the world, or brands, if you want to call them that, had no idea how to market themselves, no idea how to go to the public and do that, because it wasn't something that they were typically asked to do. So that's how we connected with them as an agency to try and do something different. Now, they were never going to put millions of dollars worth of media behind this, so it wasn't like a typical advertising campaign or a campaign of awareness, because they would literally take that millions of dollars they would spend in media and give it to the cause to go rid the world of mines. So that made sense. So they were looking for something different, and how to connect with people. So we started working with them. We were playing with iBeacon technology and trying to figure out interesting ways to use it in physical space. So we were talking to them about that. And maybe there was something we could do there. But the quote that you referenced actually came from a photographer that they worked with called Grob. Marco is probably one of the more interesting people I've ever met in my life. He's a photographer that typically shoots for GQ. So he'll shoot like Clinton for the cover of GQ. That would be a typical job for him. But for 4 months of the year, he gives his time for free to the United Nations to travel the world and basically document people that have sort of suffered through either stepping on a mine or living in these sort of circumstances where, you know, he's trying to help them raise awareness. And he had an incredible body of work of people that had survived but had unfortunately been affected or maimed by stepping on a mine. And we were talking to him about potentially setting up an exhibition, and he was the one that said that quote. Imagine what these people live with every day. They walk out their front door and there could be 50 mines literally outside their door, yet they're expected to go and collect water for their daily life. And then he said, if there was one single mine in New York today, and that went on the news right now, or it hit Twitter, or it hit Instagram, literally people would not leave their homes for like days until it was cleared. So it really sort of brought home to us the idea of that, wow, imagine if we set something up in New York that could sort of replicate this in a way. And what was interesting, the first idea that we had, which got shut down by the New York Police Department, literally, was, do you know the High Line in New York?
Yeah.
It's
from Chelsea up to the...
Yeah. So we had this idea of like getting onto the High Line and rigging it with like audio explosions that could be triggered as you walk past them. So you can imagine how that was received in New York. So the original idea of doing that really publicly, either in Grand Central or in somewhere like the High Line, it was just this big public event that would literally shock people into taking action, didn't fly. So then we thought the only way we could do this was inside a controlled environment where we could control the experience and still surprise people, but lead them in there under the pretense of something else. So we set up the exhibition with Marco at the New Museum in the Lower East Side, which is this really beautiful gallery. You had Marco's pictures there, which are stunning and by themselves deserve an exhibition. So the idea was that we would tell people you're coming to see an exhibition of Marco's work. What they didn't know was when you showed up to the exhibition, you were handed a phone and a set of headphones, and you were asked to take an audio tour around the exhibition where they explained the story behind the pictures, what had happened to these people. But what we had done is we'd rigged the whole exhibition with iBeacons that essentially became triggers in the same way that a mine works. When you walk within proximity, it would change the whole audio experience that you were having, and the experience you were seeing on the phone up to that point, which was about the pictures in front of you, changed to the fact that you just step in a bouncing Betty, here's who manufactures it, here's the damage that it does in daily life, here's how you can stop it. And then you could donate right there in the moment. So we were capturing people in that sort of moment of emotion. So that's what we did for the exhibition. It was incredibly successful. Like the social media pickup that they got off that kind of beat anything they could have done by spending literally millions of dollars on media. And it really sort of brought attention to their cause. We did it on one day a year. They go to the public called Mine Action Day. We did it on that day, and it was sort of very powerful for them, to the point now where that exhibition has been lifted, or the experience has been lifted and put inside the United Nations building. So when you go on a tour now in the United Nations, which is a really good thing to do when people come to New York, you pass through this experience, like a smaller version of it, to sort of raise awareness for everybody that goes to the United Nations building. So they've got a lot of mileage out of it, and it's become part of their story now, which is, you know,
it's also one of those experiences that I imagine the person that goes through that and attends that exhibition, they'll never forget it. You know, it's going to be absolutely in there forever. And every time they see those stories, whether it's from Syria or where it's from in the world, of someone snapping a landmine, and it's rather than it just being another number now, they've felt that same fear, that same thing, that person on the TV. So you deal with it, you know, that type of work, you know. And I guess then I know you do things around like corporate social responsibility and there as well. And then, but you also do the kind of behind the scenes stuff. So one of your clients that you have is Visa, the credit card company. Just going from like a very different type of brief. This was a brief, I understand, for basically how their people communicated with each other internally, like an intranet. And even when I hear the word intranet, I instantly, I feel like that sounds really boring.
Yeah, we did too.
Intranet sounds really boring. So I'm interested because I know that I'm doing an event very soon in Singapore for Visa. And I know the new CEO, the head of it, is very interested in the idea of curiosity, having a curious mindset. And so can you talk about that? And were there points in that briefing as you were working on that piece where you had to get really curious and you had to think about curiosity was actually very useful for the work you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's like most of the work that we do is you know, business to customers, which is the large part of what we do, or in some cases, business to business. We had to really reframe the brief, because you're right. Whenever the brief came in, I think we all kind of looked at each other and were like, they want us to design their intranet? It's like, okay, like, but really? And I think we really had to start thinking about it like the business to employee experience is I'm finding fascinating. You know, you look inside these massive organizations of literally hundreds of thousands of people. Sometimes their employee scale is bigger than some of the customer bases that we work with for some of our clients. And that, you know, what's critical for those businesses is knowledge and interaction and how people come together around a problem. But what's interesting is that they do very little effort internally to do that. They'll do an intranet. They'll do basically a file share. And they'll have a folder sitting somewhere with knowledge in it. And maybe 95% of the company don't know that it exists. So they were really looking at what should an internet be in the future rather than just like a file repository. And we were lucky in this project or one of our main clients in the project was an old UX partner of mine way back in the day at Razorfish. So he really got the power of digital, and he really got what it could do when it was done right. So he wanted to take a lot of practices from business to consumer and business to business and actually apply those learnings and those experiences, which were very rich and very interactive and very content heavy in a good way, and apply it to this massive global organization. So I had a client who had a vision that wasn't to design an intranet. He really wanted to build a community tool that, yes, you can call it the intranet, but actually it did a lot more than that. So it went from allowing you to identify people inside the organization who were like you, shared similar interests. Maybe we're in a location where you'd never ever get to. You'd never ever meet them in person, but this allowed you to connect together. So that was kind of an interesting sort of community portion of it. The other thing was the knowledge transfer. A big organization like that probably could have the same problem being solved four different places by four different teams. And maybe they don't even know that they're doing it together. So there was the ability to sort of put a problem out there into the organization and figure out whether other people were trying to solve the same problem and whether you could come together and be more efficient about it, or maybe you'd learn something that another team was trying to figure out. So there was lots of ways to use it. And once he started to talk about that, you really started to not think about it like an intranet. You really started to think about it like a community tool or a knowledge sharing tool, and making it feel like a premium tool. So one of the things that we were finding through research was that people are turned off by intranets because people put very little effort into the experience itself. So you think about your daily life where two tabs to the left of that intranet, you're looking at apple.com, you're looking at the New York Times, you're looking at whatever you spend your time on a daily basis. That's a high value, highly designed, rich experience. And then you go to the tab to the right to your internal intranet, and it would drop down in quality quite a lot. So that's
and also you've got like things like Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, totally.
Huge amounts in psychologists working out to what will make you press that button and how much you need to feed you, and they're using psychology to make you really want to have a richer experience there as well. That doesn't normally happen within internet.
No. I think our expectations now, I think even, I think we're kind of a rarefied object. We spend so much time online. We really get quality and design and what it feels like and what it should feel like. But I think we're all educated enough now to understand the value of like when something looks really good and it's a pleasure to use. And when you come back to it, you remember the interaction, and it was like a good feeling. Like you walk away sort of emotionally kind of like, that was good, as opposed to like, oh my God, do I have to use the internet? So it's like, how do we stop people feeling that? And I think one of the things we tried really hard to do there was take all of our learnings from working on things like BMW and Apple and actually apply it to the intranet and make it feel just like a pleasure to go there every day, because that was the goal, was to get these employees to go there every day and use it and learn and see what's going on inside the company globally. Well, we weren't going to be able to do that unless we sort of really amplified design and content and how it was presented. And it worked. I mean, it was a really interesting project. I think the team working on it went from that first meeting of like scratching their head to really enjoying working on it, because it was, bringing it down to the mobile screen as well, because we were also finding that a lot of people were, if you are going to use it daily, are going to use it on their phone rather than their desktop. So that was kind of an interesting sort of dynamic, because you don't really think of intranets as being mobile. You kind of think of them as like the thing that you do at your desk. So just looking at behavior and how people wanted to use it kind of drove also some of the design solutions. And so
that area around curiosity, I mean, I like the fact that it had, when you have all these individuals across a huge company like that doing their thing, some of them are working on the same problems, even though they don't know they're working on the same problems, how you float those problems to the surface and how people solving those problems at scale. And I think, and I've seen obviously this is a thing that a lot of companies are trying to address. I know Ray Dalio from Bridgewater Capital, the big hedge fund, they have this thing called brutal transparency, where every single meeting, with the exception of HR, so like hiring, firing, and pay reviews, every single meeting is video recorded, using cameras up in the corner, and it's automatically being taken into the system, and automatic transcriptions created that and tagged automatically by an AI, which means that anyone could search for anything, and it could actually turn up a conversation that was going on in a completely different room, in a different city, in a different place. And obviously the AI is over time is getting to learn that and getting to see about how we can start to use that. And so that's they're creating a pretty powerful intranet there.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because one of the things that we've been doing, and it's interesting watching different generations of designers kind of wrestle with it. The idea of having a really transparent, open design process. So, less and less we do the big reveal. The team goes away and works 2-3 weeks internally, and then we're like, okay, well, here it is. And then you get your feedback and you go back for another 2-3 weeks and you do your iterations. Really sort of trying to sort of open the design process up. There was a project that we worked on for Citibank. Whenever the Apple Watch first came out, Citi had the opportunity to be the first financial app on the new Apple Watch. And the problem was that none of us had actually seen an Apple Watch at this point. And we're really trying to figure out, okay, well, how big do we make the type? It's like, how does it work? So we were hacking it and cheating it and like making 3D printed models of watches and put them on our wrist, trying to figure out like scale and all sorts of stuff, and doing like paper prototypes that were wrapping around our wrist. So we were in this like design bubble trying to figure this out. And one of the things that we're also on a very time crunched sort of framework for delivering it, because Tim Cook was about to get on stage and talk about it, and you had to be there, and if you weren't on stage. So there was no moving the deadline. One of the things that we did to really try and figure this out was every Thursday at 4 o'clock, we invited a user base, a group of maybe 7 or 8 users into the studio to look at our work. Now, really early on, that was, when I said it was chicken scratches, I would be doing it like a compliment to say they were chicken scratches, because what we were doing was really trying to figure out a moving target and really bringing the user and the client into those meetings every Thursday, whether we were ready for a meeting or not. It was literally down tools at 3:30, put your stuff on the wall because the client and the users are coming in and we're going to talk about it. Time frame drove that process more than anything. Deadline drove that process, but we learned so much from it. We tried to sort of lift that and now adopt it into as much of our projects as we can. Because I think the designers, once they get over the initial shock of having to sort of be completely transparent about their work and not being ready, and you know how designers are, we're kind of like, well, I'll show you when I'm ready. There was no more of that. It was like, no, show me what you've got. And that sort of real-time feedback was hard for the first few meetings, but by the 4th, 5th, 6th meeting, it was really interesting watching consumers responding to, oh yeah, that's what I said in the second meeting, and that's what you've done to answer that. Like, that's, as a designer, it's incredibly gratifying. That's like incredible to sort of, oh, okay, you get this. So there was a dialogue that happened there that doesn't normally happen on our projects. And we've tried to sort of, where we can recreate that vibe, that mood, we do, especially with the client as well.
Is that having that very, very fast feedback loop to the work that you're doing as well. It reminds me a little bit of another bank, Monzo, which grew really fast. I mean, I think it got like 1 million users in like no time, no advertising. And it married obviously finance with design, with real, almost like thinking about mental health and psychology, which is not a thing you would necessarily think would go together. And they saw that feeling that, like, how can we de-stress people? Money is already a stressful thing for most people anyway, to think about money. How can we take that stress out and de-stress that? And a very simple thing, and I don't use the app, so I'm not promoting this as a customer, but I have friends that use it. Was, those times when you just lose your card, you might have fallen down the back of a settee or a sofa somewhere, or you've left it in the house or your office desk, and you have that moment, the heart starts racing. What about my card? And normally what would happen is you would call the bank, cancel the card, take 2 weeks for the card to come. Because you have the app, in this case the Monzo app, you just press pause. It basically froze the card, and then when you found the app, when you found the card again, you press unpause. And instantly the stress levels for the customer decrease, and it was a very beautiful, it was a very nice kind of design experience.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that's very insightful, because we as going through this. So imagine that trilogy around the table. You have your design team, you have the people that essentially will be the end user of the product, and you have the client, and you have a device that none of us really knew how we were going to use it in our lives at that point. We already had this amazing technology in our pocket called an iPhone, and it's like, why do I need this on my wrist? Like, what's the purpose? And our client was like, wow, we could push your bank balance to your wrist, and you see it on your watch. And the user's like, I don't want my bank balance on my wrist. Why would I do that? Everybody sitting around the table can see how much money I have. So it was really interesting watching like a client's feature set bounce up against a user's feature set, and really what stuck and what didn't, based on the user saying, I would never use that. In fact, the first thing I would switch off on that watch would be my balance hitting the screen. So hearing them sort of in real time, figuring out how they would use the watch in real life was really interesting, because I think to this day we're using it very differently to when it was first released. I mean, I use the iWatch now to monitor my health. I didn't think I would when I first bought it, but that's what it's actually really good for, because it tracks everything. So that's great. I don't read emails on my watch. I don't really even look at text messages on my watch. So it's interesting watching how that device has evolved over time. And then just thinking back in that meeting room before any of us had ever seen it, how people were imagining they would use it, and now how we actually use it today. Very, very different.
Yeah, in fact, we had one guest, I think from Cornell University, a professor there recently, and she works in ergonomics and robotics and wearable devices is really her specialty. And she said a lot of the work they're doing now in the medical side is some of these watches are so good now that they can tell if some people that suffer from things like manic depression or issues around that, they walk. You walk in a certain way. There's triggers. You use your body in a certain way, and the machine learning can recognize what that is, and it can then send a ping to your GP or your doctor and say, "Hey, patient number, blah blah blah. We looks like they're having an issue," and then the doctor can call them up and say, "Do you want to come in and talk about your medication or whatever as well?" So they're being used in ways that we don't even.
No, totally. It's almost like the screen has become the least important part of the watch. I mean, it tells me the time, but it's the technology that sits underneath that. I mean, that's a great example of like how I can start to track and collect data around your health, and then what we do with that data is sort of make life better for you. That's incredible. That's very powerful.
So we've been talking about successes with clients. Tell me about a time when it didn't go so well. You worked with a client, you gave your heart and your soul for this project you're working on, and it didn't go necessarily where you intended it to go. And what was the lesson you took from that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few of those. One in particular that I think it really changed how I thought about design and the separation of design and personal taste was we were working on the Ford Centennial, and we had a really great relationship with the client that we worked on. We worked with them for years, and the Ford Centennial was probably their biggest moment for a long time, and there was many brands working on it. It was very political. Everybody was trying to sort of own it because it was going to be a big piece. And we were given the job of working on the digital part of that, and we're handed a lot of like information and brand guidelines and everything that came from the other agencies, and we're sort of asked to use it and respect it. And that's essentially what we were doing. Trying to push it, trying to make it good design, but working within the limits of like this overall brand vision for what they were doing with Centennial. We worked on it for a really long time, and we thought we'd ended up in a really good place. And we went to our client to do our design review. And it was one of those meetings where you just could not figure out what was going on. It was like she just had this really visceral reaction to the design. And you got to remember, this is like a 3-year relationship where we had never had this type of meeting before. We had a really good relationship. She really trusted us. And in my head, I could hear what she was saying, which was basically, we're not using that orange. But in my head, I'm like, why? I couldn't rationalize it at all. And I was like, but it's in the style guide and everybody else is using it. Why can't we use it? And I get into this like circular debate about this color. And that just wasn't like her, and it wasn't like us to defend it so strongly. And it was just one of those meetings just ended really badly. And it was like probably the first design review I've had end really badly. I mean, it was like it really sort of hit me. I was like, wow, that did not go well. But then she was throwing a barbecue that evening at her house, and I was like, wow, do I even go to this barbecue? Because like that was not good. It was like, maybe I should just get on a plane and leave Detroit and go back to like New York and like maybe come back in a few weeks. And she was, no, everybody has to come. You're all here. So we went to the barbecue, and at some point during the barbecue, I go into her bathroom. She just moved into this new house, and it was literally painted the same color. That orange was everywhere in her bathroom. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, look at that. She loves this orange, or she really hates it, one or the other. She painted her bathroom that color. So I go out and she's standing there, and I'm like, do I say anything? And I'm like, so your bathroom? And she was like, yeah, and I hate it. Before I got the words out of my mouth. So
she was making a multi-million-dollar design, marketing design campaign decision, and based upon some
mistake in the bathroom color.
About a bathroom interior design choices.
Yeah, and it was like one of those moments where I was like, wow, you really have to sort of like put your personal preference and taste outside the room when you come to your day job. It's like she hadn't. I mean, she painted that, looked at it probably every morning and every night, hated it, brought it to work, saw the same color inside this bigger brand piece, and was really sort of struggling with it. And I mean, I get it. I really do get it, because, you know, I'll argue for stuff that I personally really love, that may not always be right for the business. You really have to sort of remind yourself you're a designer, not an artist. You're solving someone's problem, and you got to do it respectfully and in the right way. So I kind of walked away from that moment thinking, check mentally every time I go into a design review that I'm arguing for the brand and the right thing for the brand, and not something I personally believe is like looks good.
So that's about taking the ego piece. You know,
very much, yeah. And I think
it
good designers have figured that out. Like, they've really figured out how to sort of switch that off, and or at least not switch it off, but know when to argue and when not to argue, when to debate, when not to debate. You know, at a certain point, if it's not selling, you have to move on. You can't keep forcing the issue. It has to move on at some point. Yeah.
Now, we've been talking about tools, and I know in the work that you do in design, and there's a huge number of tools. You know, it's all different things you can do. Incredible things now. You know, whether it's creative officer, art director, whatever your role is within design and advertising, marketing. But first of all, tell me if there's one tool that you use more than any other that you don't think you could live without, and then tell me what your views are on tool sets as it relates to the industry that you're in, with such a proliferation of tools.
Yeah. But if I think back when I first started working in digital, and this might have been my own lack of due diligence before I left the music industry and started working in digital, if I remember this correctly, when we were designing, we were allowed to use 4 fonts and 258 colors, and no image could be over 800 by 600 pixels. That was pretty restrictive. So coming from a guy who was doing record cover design, could do whatever he wanted, like that was like, sorry, say that again. It was like one of those like moments where if I look at where we're at today and what we can do in digital, we can kind of do anything. We've got moving image, we've got film, we've got beautiful photography you can use. If you look at the Google font library alone, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fonts. We can do audio design. There's a lot we can do. But whilst that's brilliant, at the same time, it can be paralyzing. And I feel like sometimes that's often to the detriment of like a core idea or a core concept. So I think from that perspective, as we look at giving our design teams the accessibility to all of that, we've also tried to strip back that tool set so we don't waste time with one designer wanting to use this and another designer wanting to use that. We've tried to get a common tool set together so that, you know, as a networked agency across like 12 offices, our teams don't always sit within shoulder distance of each other. Sometimes we'll have a team in Calgary working with a team in New York, working with a team in London on the same project. So a common tool set between those people spread across, you know, a 10-hour time difference from one side to the other, where they can share libraries and share work remotely, and also do it whenever the other person might be sleeping and they're awake. How do we do that? That was a challenge that we had. So the tool that we probably use most, I mean, the core of the tool set right now is Sketch, because I think the Sketch tool has evolved so much over time. It's incredible because we can go from, you know, really from UX and interaction design, or what we used to call information architecture, product design, into visual design and art direction within the same tool. We don't have to do that remake that we used to do in the past. That file literally gets passed along. The same team works within the same file. Then that can go into a prototype pretty quickly and hands itself off really nicely into products like Envision or Principle, where we can add motion to the interaction. So that sort of core tool set, pretty much everyone in the agency uses. And that's a good way when you transpose between projects and brands, you're working in the same way. So that's been a kind of interesting learning curve, because the other thing that's allowed us to do is by doing that, we've actually freed up some time. Because it's a very efficient way to work. And the way we free up time is we create libraries that are shareable. So when you go into a new project, we have elements that we created on another project that can be reused. So there's an efficiency there that has given us more time back, and that time back allows us to go back and think about the work differently and maybe frees up more time for concepting. Clients aren't paying us any more money to think. We have to figure out how to make more time for ourselves within their budget. So the budgets aren't getting bigger. If anything, they're getting smaller. We just have to be more efficient within those timeframes. And I think looking at the tool set has allowed us to do that, and at the same time giving us more time to think.
So think about that efficiency piece as well, though. I mean, you see, for example, examples with Autodesk of augmented design, where they
thing for the new Airbus, you see some of those panels, the AI has been told, this is what we need. It needs to be this size, needs to be able to be this much weight, needs to hold this much, to do this much.
Yeah.
Go, and it goes and creates thousands of different designs, all absolutely conforming to the brief that was put in there. Yeah. And then the human designers then review all these designs and just from an aesthetic or from other perspectives, then decide, okay, this is the ones that we're going to prototype and going to build up. Are you seeing, is that kind of thing happening in the work that you have in a lot in industrial design?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing through, I mean, we put a lot of effort into like customer research and behavioral research, and you see patterns repeat themselves across verticals. So things that you do in automotive around a build your own configurator for a car can be applied to an e-commerce site, can be applied to a brand site. So you see similar behaviors appear within verticals, even though the verticals might feel very different and you're selling very different things or communicating very different things. How people use them is similar. So what we're doing is using that behavioral research to sort of like recognize interaction patterns. Like what are people doing commonly across wherever they interact, whether it be on a phone, a desktop, or physical space across any brand. We're starting to use those and build them as like a library, an internal library that we create. We're calling it kind of a design patterns library that sort of sits as a centralized repository for any designer inside the organization to use. So you're not starting literally with a blank canvas. You can literally go in, and if you see a behavior or a pattern and we have something already developed for it, we can pull that in and start from there. Then you're right, what you do on top of that is the brand. That underlying foundation stays true, but what you can do is then augment it and adjust it and adapt it, and then add the brand layer on top, which is really where the value of the brand comes in. So it's really trying to sort of educate our teams to sort of not start from a blank canvas every time. You don't have to. Actually, we have a lot of learnings that we can use. Let's start from there and see where it goes. So we get to a prototype really quickly, then we can test it, get feedback, and then that goes back into that feedback loop that we talked about earlier. It's like, what are customers saying about it? Do they like this? Is it responding well with them? So we're trying to sort of do that and sort of build up our own sort of patterns library and just get smarter with our clients' time and money, where we can sort of like spend more time on the brand side of it and less on the sort of foundational side of it.
And what about a book? If you were to recommend one book, it could be a book on design or a book or just to open people's minds up, what would that book be?
I've got hooked lately on the Do series. So you know the Do lectures. So the Do lectures, well, I was a massive fan of anyway, and what David's doing with those, and what I love what they did was coming out of the lectures is they started to put them into very short formatted books where, you know, there's just really great insight in a very short, quick read, called the Do series. It's a publishing series now. So any of those are fantastic. The ones that I'm reading right now there's Do with Purpose, which is a book on how brands can bring the idea of purpose to their business. That's a great one. Do Pause, I really love, which is about taking a pause. Like, think about it, like we're bombarded, literally, if you sit at a desk everywhere from Slack to email to social media to work, like we're constantly bombarded. And the whole premise behind Do Pause is like, take a moment, even just 5 minutes in your day, just to switch it all off and think, or an hour or a week or a sabbatical or a year off. Like, it goes up in scale as the book goes on, but the premise is the same. Like, take a minute to think about what you're doing and whether it's the right thing to do. So I love those books, the Do series, mostly because they're incredibly practical. Like you read a book and you can literally read these things in a day and you will walk away with like 5 things to do.
Fantastic. So I'm going to go and check this series myself. I'm going to go pick up one of those books. And what about, we're talking about music right at the start. If you do recommend one album, maybe it was an album that you worked on the cover for, what would that album be?
Oh my God. Have we got another hour? My taste is really eclectic. I think an album that's stuck with me over the last few years is the Interpol album, Bright Lights. You know, when you revisit an album over and over and over again, and you're still finding new things in it, it's got something going on that is beyond just like a thing that you bought. It's a moment in time. So that album, I think, is, I think when you ask most people, they're like, it's in their top 5 all time. And then I also had the luck of seeing them perform it live, which was just one of those moments as well, where you're in the room and you're like, I am lucky to be here. So that's one of those albums that's always stuck with me.
And a final question for you. I want you to imagine you woke up tomorrow morning, you wake up anywhere in the world you want to wake up, but you have to start from scratch. No one knows you, you know no one. You have to begin again. What would you do? How would you restart things?
I think if I was to reboot, like if you think about what I did, I kind of worked in publishing, exhausted it, worked in the music industry, exhausted it. I'm now within digital. And I kind of look back at publishing and music and I'm like, wouldn't it have been nice just to work across all of those? And like the learnings and things that I could have brought between all three. I think the way that the industry kind of forces you is to sort of be really good at one thing. So I would, if I was to wake up tomorrow and redo all of that, I think I'd resist that. And I'd probably try really hard to keep that sort of energy you have when you move between formats and you try different things. So that's what I would do different, looking back. Hopefully it's not too late.
There's always time. There's always time. You need to pause and then move on to another. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. It's fascinating just kind of learning about your creative journey, your creative life, the work that you're doing. I'm really looking forward to seeing future work that you go on to create as well. And where's the best place for people to learn more about your work, to connect with you?
The work we do with Critical Mass is hit criticalmass.com. I mean, all of our work is pretty fresh up there. You'll see all the latest that we're doing there. And then for me personally, follow me on Instagram. Everything hits there. I've tried to narrow it down to one social platform. So it's like pretty much anything that's going on with me personally and you know, where I'm talking or things that I'm involved with. That's where you'll find me.
Fantastic. We'll put all those links here. Conor, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks very much.
Continued success with your creative work, and who knows, we might maybe share a stage or be on a judging panel.
Cool. Yeah. All the best.
If you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.